I noticed this pot, so I pulled it out, and at my dismay, it was marijuana plants.
How'd you know it was a marijuana plant?
I've seen it on television. They show it all the time.
Did it have an odor?
No.
No odor, okay. So in your front yard?
Yes.
So what did you do with the plant?
Immediately, I assumed it was my son, who has had problems with drugs.
Okay.
And I began blaming him mercilessly. He was denying it. I didn't believe him. I drove like a maniac down to the parole officer to complain. Luckily, the parole officer, because I could have gotten my son back into prison. Luckily, the parole officer was in the field. So I left, calmed down. I got home.
Did you find out who it belonged to?
Yes.
Who did it belong to?
My tenant.
But it didn't belong to the defendant.
In the beginning, it did. He came to me and explained when he saw how I was...
I'm talking about at the time you found it in your front yard. Did it belong to her?
No, at that time, she had given him the day before...
She'd given it to the tenant.
To the tenant. And he didn't know what to do with it in his room. He put it under that bush. When my son said to him, "Get this out of your room, my mother will go crazy." So that's where he hid it, under these bushes. Then he explained to me...
What'd you do with the plant?
After that, I realized that it wasn't my son, I took it in the house. I had a beautiful fireplace. It was going, and I pulled it out by the roots, threw it in the fireplace, and I stood there while it was burning. And I was so happy that, I said, God, I'm so glad I didn't get my son into trouble. I stood there not realizing it, and I was like a dummy.
Well, that's what you're asking for, damages against her for your burning the marijuana plant that didn't belong to her in your fireplace.
It belonged to her in the beginning.
I'm not talking about at the time it was... She had given it to the... assuming that that's so, she had given it to your tenant. It didn't belong to her anymore.
No, but she brought it there. That's illegal for her to have given him a marijuana plant because she was pursuing his affections. And he's only a kid. He's only 19, 20 years old. She's a lady. She's been married. And so the...
You mean there are ladies who haven't been married, they're no longer ladies?
Yes, but I mean, she's an older woman pursuing a young kid.
How old are you, old lady?
22. I've never been married.
Never been married?
No.
Did you give this tenant a marijuana plant?
I rented a house in Brea.
Did you give him a marijuana plant? Was it before November 5th?
I don't remember. I don't know when it was.
You know what he did with it?
I assume he took it to his house.
Okay.
So...
You're asking for damages, ma'am, as your complaint says. Listen to this young man. You're asking for damages because you said that the smell lasted in your fireplace for 2 or 3 weeks?
When I stood there, I was inhaling this stuff, and and all of a sudden, the room started going around, and I fell backwards on a rocking chair, and I hurt myself. And it took me several minutes before I...
How long did this last? Did it last 2 or 3 weeks?
Yes. And then it took me 3 weeks to get over this when I finally felt the headaches left.
Okay.
The headaches were all gone by that time. And this was a Thanksgiving Eve, the night before Thanksgiving. She and Chris and everybody was in front of my house with this dog. It was a puppy. But it's a big dog.
What kind of dog?
Labrador.
A Labrador. And I thought it was her puppy.
Whose puppy was it?
She had just then brought it and given it to Chris for a present.
Did you give
a
Chris
Thanksgiving present?
The dog?
Christmas. It was an early Christmas present.
Pardon?
It was an early Christmas present.
Okay.
And the next morning was Thanksgiving Day. I was busy in the kitchen getting ready for my daughter and her family to come for Thanksgiving dinner.
Are you
I heard
claiming that the dog did some damage to your property?
horrible.
When did the damage take place?
Thanksgiving morning.
How long after she gave the dog to Chris?
The next morning.
The next morning.
Yes, and the dog wasn't supposed to be in the house. She should have used her brains to realize that nobody living in one little bedroom could have a dog.
Ma'am, that's beside the point. She gave the dog away. The damage to your property wasn't done until Chris owned the dog.
Yes.
So she's not responsible for that.
So that dog had loose bowels, and he crapped all the way down the stairs, and a big puddle in front of the entrance. Terrible.
Ma'am, I believe you. I believe everything you've said. The question is she responsible for something, for a marijuana plant that she didn't own, number one, and that you burned in your fireplace?
Yes.
You caused your own damage.
But I didn't know that. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't know about that.
That's not her fault.
No. But anyway...
But anyway, let's get to the dog that did all these terrible things.
Yes.
She didn't own the dog either at the time the dog did these things. She'd given the dog as a gift to Chris.
But he had no right to, she had no right to do this.
Oh,
she should have asked me first.
What duty does she owe you to ask you your permission to give him a dog?
Because he only lives in one room, a furnished room.
That's between you and him.
So I had him call her that day, and she did come. And I said, take it to your apartment. It's your dog. She said, oh, no, my landlord will make me move. I said, well, now Chris has got to move because he can't be here with a dog.
Ma'am, you keep talking, and I've listened very patiently, but you just don't have a lawsuit against this lady. She didn't do anything that was negligent. She had no contract with you. Chris is the one you have a.
But
why didn't you sue Chris?
Because then right after that.
Why didn't you sue Chris?
Because he joined the Navy.
Oh, to see the world.
Yes. To get away from all of these bills.
Chris is gone.
Yes.
Flown the coop. Okay, now I.
So now she caused all this. Now I don't have a tenant.
And you don't have anyone to sue because she's not responsible. So let's go to your countersuit, ma'am.
She came into my job and started screaming at me. My boss was in the cooler in the back.
Did you lose your job because of
No,
it?
I didn't lose my job, no.
Anything happened at your job that...
I was talking too.
Pardon?
Well, she didn't write me up. She was gonna write me up, but she didn't. She came in. Yeah, she would not leave. My boss...
You haven't really been damaged any because she came to your job.
Well, I mean, my customers were there. My clientele was there.
I said, have you been damaged any? Did you lose any customers or clientele?
No.
Okay. And you're asking for defending yourself, you're asking for your day's work that you missed. Is that right?
I've missed like 4 days of work.
Because of
this, yes.
Well, unfortunately, I can't give you those. What you're in effect saying is that this is a malicious prosecution suit. She has no basis for her lawsuit, which is true. But number one, in malicious prosecution, you have to win the case first before you can sue for malicious prosecution. And number two, even if you win the case, you can't sue for malicious prosecution because someone sued you in small claims court. Not in California, maybe other states, but not in California. So your countersuit doesn't have any merit. Judgment is that plaintiff take nothing by the suit, defendant take nothing on the countersuit.
Judge Llewelyn talks to the litigants about Judge Wapner's decision right after these messages.
So Judge Wapner finds for the defendant in this case. Ms. Vining, the plaintiff, is on her way out of the courtroom. Ma'am, what do you think about what Judge Wapner just had to say?
I don't think much about that. I think it was wrong because I was sick. I was sick over the whole incident. I'm glad that Chris is finally gone because now that problem is gone. But I have an empty room. That's going to cost me $241. for an ad to get a new tenant.
Well, you can't blame that on the defendant, can you?
No.
You're not trying to do that, are you?
No, no.
You know, you sound like a rather tough lady here. You were really gonna turn your son into a probation officer?
Yes, I was. And I want to apologize to him over the air or in the court or wherever, because I didn't trust him. I didn't believe him, and it caused a friction between us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Officer Burrell's waiting back there. He has some things for you. Now, the defendant, Ms. Wagner's on her way out of the courtroom. I can't help but think you're kind of surprised to have been sued for this. Yeah. Are you?
Yeah.
You ever been sued before?
No. Can I say?
What about giving gifts to Chris? You obviously were lavishing gifts on him.
A dog I wouldn't consider lavishing. I mean,
a marijuana plant and a dog, right?
Oh, the plant he got from himself out of my backyard. You know, it was there before we moved in. It was back there in our bushes, and he found it and took it home. As simple as that. I said, take it, get out of my house, and gave it to him. That was it.
Well, have you heard from Chris since he's joined the Navy?
No, I didn't even go near her house. I stayed far away.
So it's all over now, you hope?
Yeah, it's all over, yeah.
Good enough. Congratulations. Officer Burrell's waiting for you, and that will bring this case to a close.